There, my stitching friends. I've been making some little Christmas tree houses, and I'm putting zigzag stitch around the edge of my applique. So I'm just going to show you how I set up and do that. You can see it's more of a satin stitch. It's a tighter stitch than I would usually use. I'm using a bobbin thread in the bobbin because I don't want much bulk underneath. I'm using an isocordis and embroidery machine stitching thread in the top. I'm using the white, and usually when I'm stitching on applique, I quite often use a fairly open zigzag, but I wanted this to look like snow, so I'm doing a much tighter zigzag, which is more in line with the satin stitch really. So I've got my open-toed applique foot on my machine, and I'm going to set my machine onto just the basic zigzag stitch, and then I'm going to make the stitch width a little longer. So when we start this zigzag stitch, this is how it you start it from the top there for you. Okay, I'll take this out in a moment. That's how it usually would look, but I want it much closer. I want the stitches much closer together. So to make the stitches closer together, I'm going to alter the length of the stitch. So I'm going to go to my stitch length, which is on 1.5 at the moment. Mine goes from 0 up to 6. It's at 1.5. If I take it down to 1 and show you that a second. Right. So that'll make a much closer zigzag stitch. And you can see that's closer than the original one, but I want it even closer than that for what I want to do, because I want it to look like snow. So I'm going to take my stitch length down even more. I'm going to take it down to let's try 0.6 and see what that looks like. Now this is a much shorter stitch length, so the stitches are going to be closer together. Can you see it? They're a lot closer together. That's sort of bordering on a satin stitch now. I might take it down to 0.55, but that's about all I would do. The other thing you can do is alter the stitch length if you want that wider. So at the moment my width is on 3.6, so let's try altering the stitch width up to 4. Mine goes from 0 to, well, on this setting 5.5, but I'm going to set it on 4 a second, and let's have a look. It's just a tad wider. And it's just a tad wider than it was up there. So I think I'll take it back down to 3.5 because some of my windows here are quite small. So it'll depend on what suits what you were doing. So I'm going to take that back down, stitch width 3.5, and I'm going to put the length at 0.5. And that then is, I think that's about, yeah, that's about what I want. So we'll make a start with that. Okay, because I'm using such a close stitch, if I don't put something on the back of this, it's going to pull, and these stitches are all going to pull at the top, and it won't look very nice. If I'm doing a wider stitch, you can get away with it, but because I'm doing something quite close together, so a short stitch length, I put some thin quilter's wadding on the back of my work, and that's to give it some body. So I'm going to make a start on this now, and I'm going to set my machine so that the needle always stops in the down position, because that's the easiest way to do machine applique. I do have a knee lifter on my machine, so I can just lift the foot with my knee. If you've got one, this is great for applique. If we don't have one, when you come to a corner now, you're going to stop with this on the outside of your work. So I'm going to do another one stitch. Stop there, and then lift the presser foot. You might have to lift it manually. I've got my knee lifter. Turn your work, put the foot back down, and start going up the next side. Now as you're going along, you can move it with your fingers, but if you feel you need to move a little bit more than that, stop with it on the outside of your work when you're going around curves like that, and then move it. So we're going along, and I feel like I want to move it a bit more, so I'm going to stop with it on the outside, the needle on my outside of the work. And all the time, my eyes are on where that needle's falling. It needs to fall just off the applique pieces. And then take your time, move it round. Because these are curves going that way. If the curves were going inside, you'd stop on the inside to move. But because they're going on the outside, you stop on the outside. And I'm just going to turn that around. And another little turn. And another little turn. So always stopping on the outside for this type of work. Here we go. We come in now, and one more stop, I think. It helps to have, if you've got a speed control on your machines, but set to medium to slowish, because you need to be in control of what's happening with the stitches here. So I'm coming down now to where I began, and I'm just going to go over it down to the bottom. You can put a few stitches in the spot, or a slightly back stitch if you want. I'm just going to put a few stitches in the spot, and then take your work out. Okay, so that now is my first window. You see a snowy effect around it. So that's all I wanted to show you today. Bye.